DCarsonCPA, MFC in the lines, when we bring out the whiteboard just to sketch out some simple principles. The basic principles correspond to points that go down in much greater detail and points where we can help on more specific lines. These are the introductory lines in Risk Plus Cyber, only for the point of a problem that we all face in the economy. It's a problem that includes the stakeholders being individuals and families, includes industry, government, NGOs, and nonprofits. It's repeated for every country in the global economy that's using technology and communications platforms. But our lines are, considering the start points, the local, the state, multi-state, regional, and national lines, and then the global lines. Within the economy, we have people working together. There's the productive lines of free enterprise and people in communities trying to work together, individuals receiving services where they're connecting out to industry to exchange goods and services. The individuals will have dollars and they're going to industry to buy products, goods, or services. There's transactional cycles there. With government supports different needs for families and their broad societal needs. They correspond to financials, they correspond to taxation, governance, and many points. And then the NGO and nonprofit lines where they do research. Some NGOs think about global hunger, global agriculture, global energy improvements, nonprofits working at local, regional, state, national levels, all trying to work together in the societal lines where we all meet with data. The Risk Plus Cyber lines, in a simple overview, have a connection to financials and compliance. So our root lines to Risk Plus Cyber is value-added skills in financials and compliance that include coming up from the audit lines for the controls, for risk management and assessment. And you'd have to think that the starting point for the value in Risk Plus Cyber is, what's at risk is the value that's within the transactional cycle. So the understanding of financials and compliance is the start point for understanding and helping out to manage on the lines of Risk Plus Cyber. We have other types of data that are in systems. It's emails, communications. You have weak IDs, because in the system that we use IDs, technology has reached a point, where it has surpassed. It was built for prior systems, and now we've surpassed the ability with great technology to look at these things and kind of break them all out. So new work is being done in different sectors to work with IDs and strengthen it, and that's where you have the different type of thumbprint and retinal scanners and different types of innovation that's happening on those lines to think, how do you better protect data that goes into systems? And then you've got the other lines of public data, which is open data that's been released for the idea that it can help society. Certain levels of open data can help society. Now, I'm not confident for myself that the lines of open data have been fully risk assessed prior to being released, but it's not necessarily, it's not a call that we make. That's a societal call about what becomes open data and what's released, what's not. A prudent point would be to look at the data before you release it, to connect it to financials and compliance and think about what is the danger level. But if it's already an open line, then the fact is that the data is already out there, and this is something we've all been discussing for at least a decade, that there's plenty of data out there, and things that are out there can benefit growth and learning. And for the right hands, it's people that are learning and growing, and in the wrong place, it's people that have bad ideas about what to do with the data. So the balance of risk and cyber is to how do you work to both help growth. So we look at the lines of growth in the MFC lines, and then the other lines we think about risk management and cyber. How do you control that element of risk and still allow for growth? It's a challenging balance, but those are the lines of opportunity in the economy, to look at growth and to look at risk and try and find the right balance. It's also what people look for in the marketplace with investments and things like that. It's a similar set of rules in a different place. On the data lines, all of these groups, being societal groups, create data lines. They create open gov, open business, open society, social lines, and Internet of Things lines eventually, which everyone's a little bit concerned about where that heads to. All that data feeds into servers, and inevitably it eventually populates a 360 global world on data where we all have web servers and different things. Now, there is fragmentation and controls because data travels across many different programming languages and lines, but there's also some languages that are frequently in different places and things like that. So you need a good knowledge of data and what's on those lines to begin to think about risk assessment. And part of the point that can benefit you can also hurt you, because within the structure of data there's been some siloing, and that's a good thing. But the problem is, for IT to independently understand where the value at risk is in these lines, you can't be siloed. You have to really have a good risk assessment of the data that you sit upon, how it connects to the economy, and what that can be. And I believe that's where our strategic value comes in, is that understanding of societal data on many different levels and what that means to the Risk Plus Cyber equation. So when we start that out, we think about societal data, what data is in the lines, where we can map in on risk plus cyber, and the importance of those points is to help out on the controls, because what we have now is kind of, non-sufficient lines here where it's not the fault of these points, but it's the point that technology has advanced so much that so much more is computable that it begins to create a risk here now, so people are running from behind to catch up with controls and IDs and whatnot. So without getting deeper to that, we've got a very clear perspective line to what some of those levels of problems are. The lines of audit for internal and external audit are certainly part of the solution set. Technology audit, risk management, all parts of the points that can help as we get data that feeds into servers, and the best value, the server data can be up in the cloud, and that feeds and populates lines where everyone's looking for convenience for mobile ability with the workforce, but that's also a challenge line. So it's this double-edged thing where you've got the lines on growth and the lines on risk, and they're paired twins because you need to understand one, in my opinion, to get to look at the other. So we have broad societal framework. The stakeholders here are everyone, and what's happening. It's economics, macro, micro financials, legal, technology, communications, and the societal lines of industry, government, nonprofits, NGOs, and individuals, families, and communities that are all at risk in here, or are trying to find that balance of what's good for growth and what's important for risk. You look in the societal framework, we have a framework of free speech where everyone is allowed to communicate. There's a right to know in the public sector about how our government works, so we do have open lines, and that's a good thing in societal terms, but it's also a risk factor because what's known by us is knowable. There's the Fourth Amendment, which is the right to protect people, specifically on the emails and communications lines. That's a societal challenge where legal is involved in the challenges of risk plus cyber, trying to define what's private versus public data and what forum are you and where does that become public data and how does that become a risk. That's the Fourth Amendment element of it, and protection from illegal search and seizure. And some of it has to do with free speech and people feeling free to communicate and not feeling like people are in their communications, and yet at the same time, granted global challenges, that becomes a necessary element at some point. So it's a very complex area, and we are just watching it. Our point in commenting here is it's just one of the referential points when you look at this big world of risk and cyber. Now, when we look at the public awareness, so there's the public awareness need, that kind of talks about, we have a lot of knowledge on science and agriculture, on energy, all sorts of different things, and that knowledge can propel business and innovation, but it's also societal risk. So how do we manage that? Who is to determine the right line of risk and need to know basis and all that stuff? And it's all a very big challenge, but already now the data is out there for innovation, and what that means is that if the data is already out there, then sooner or later the technology will run to a point where it catches it all. And I think the fundamental risk and concern is that the data was released before the thought on the controls, so there's a need to understand what is the level and caliber of available data for the understanding that there need to be risk management controls put around that. Now, the other line is the safety line. You want to ultimately protect the safety of the interest groups, especially individuals, families, communities, and then the institutions that they support, industry, government, nonprofits, and NGOs, which are in the aggregate the economy. We're looking at a 360 world. There's 270 different countries, or approximately so. They correspond on trade and growth. Ideally, they have good ideas about how to work together and build a good global community, but there's also tension and strife. There's hunger. There is lack of resources. There's unlimited wants and needs and relatively scarce resources, and those are always factors for global tension, and so that's some of what needs to be managed. Part of that is the communications and education cycle, outreach across cultures to let people know about the benefits of working together. That's certainly an important point. And then when we get into these data lines over here, we just want to briefly touch on this. The structure of data in the economy, it pretty much goes back to data tables, data programs, and programming, where you have something that pushes and pulls data into a data table. And then again, that's where you got to set up that risk management and cybersecurity line. So there's some very specific policies and procedures that are well defined. We're not going to define them here for you, but we'll say that in the back end of it, it does have something to do with the internal audit lines, the external audit lines, controls and risk management. And those are good start referential points to fall into the lines and help on cross-functional teamwork. The value of DCarsonCPA is a broad perspective on global research with consideration to data, technology, communications lines, to the hardware, to the software, to the programming, and then how these lines work with data programming, and then these line controls of you have physical controls over access to data, you have hardware level controls, and then you have data level controls, and those have different technical names, but we're not here to explain to you where all those things are. We're here to tell you that we have a broad strategic map. It does go down to the detail levels to fall in and help on the lines of risk plus cyber. But this introductory line, hopefully interesting to you, is let you know we have a broad framework. We're here to help on risk plus cyber. Our resources will share more with you, and there's much more to the details where we map in to help on strategic teamwork. Our goal is to help for individuals and families make for a little bit of a better economy with more security in the transaction cycles between industry, government, and nonprofits, so that we all can feel a little bit better about the global economy and where we map in. And that's something that needs to happen. It's a naturally evolving process. These open data lines were put there for scientific innovation, for global points, and for local, state, regional, and domestic points of innovation and growth for the economy. But all of that must be balanced with a prudent framework of risk management. So we can help on strategic teams trying to balance this out. Part of what's missing and needs to be in there is better public education, public awareness about controls and security is an important start point, and then the actual implementation of controls that are followed both by individuals, industry, government, and nonprofits, and strengthening the lines of how technology is evolving and how the individual lines of working with data are evolving to make sure that there's good, strong strategies that are working on risk management and cyber for all of the sector stakeholders in around 360 world, where we become more and more dependent on technology as something that can solve problems, but also inherently has risk problems. I'm Dean Carson. Connect to us at DCarsonCPA. We're here for the Risk Plus Cyber lines, these lines to let you know we can help. Thanks so much.